Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChatArgos. With me, as usual, every week, Jonathan Reiter, our CEO and Chief Data Scientist. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for taking time out of your precious schedules to spend a bit of time with us. Right, so in case you forgot what ChatArgos is, we're the blockchain intelligence firm that was made famous for discovering that Binance's BUSD stablecoin was under-collateralized to the tune of $1.4 billion US dollars. Of course, we've done a lot more since then. You guys already know that. But what we're going to talk about this week, three things basically. We're going to talk about FarFuture. Have you never heard of it? Well, yeah, I will tell you a little bit more about what that is. We'll talk a little bit about the SEC objection. The SEC objection for Binance's motion to dismiss lawsuit. I'm sure you haven't read it. We have it here. I did. 88 pages, all 88 pages of it. Of course, some of that is bibliography. So, but it's not as interesting as you would think it is. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about the recent run-up in prices. Number go up. What's that about? What does that mean? What are the conspiracy theories we've been hearing? And is there any merit to what's going on? So let's just jump straight into it. FarFuture. If you've been following us on Twitter, you'll know that we've not just us, but a couple of other people have flagged the fact that a mysterious wallet on Tron has been moving tens of billions of dollars over the years. And just a couple of days ago, I think, FarFuture made 4 withdrawals for exactly $889,999 from 4 separate Binance wallets into it. If you want the details, you can get it on our Twitter handle at ChatArgos. But what's that about?
Okay, so I think we're starting to get kind of a better sense for the lay of the land, a lot of the ecosystem stuff here. So there are a reasonable number of projects on Tron that are affiliated with Tron, right? So the SunSwap stuff and whatever, JustLand,
yeah.
That are all parts of the Tron DAO or related to the Tron, whatever Tron stuff. So there are other wallets that have been active over the years.
Yep.
Nobody ever really knew. If there's no customer retail-facing DeFi protocol interface, swap DEX type thing,
Yep.
you would not necessarily know. And now we're starting to get enough information about how stuff works to figure out what who's who, what's going on. This particular one, which is a large active thing, I mean, people see this on Explorers a lot, where there's some wallet tagged with some name on it you've never heard of, and it's busy, but you don't know what it's doing. This thing looks to be a large counterparty for a number of the sort of known Tron ecosystem, Just-in-Sun complex type stuff.
To be precise, based on our data and what we've tracked, FarFuture, which is the name of a market-making firm, it clocked up a pretty impressive $50 billion worth of transactions, and most of it was with SunSwap, Huobi, JustLand, and Poloniex, 4 entities which are all commonly known to be associated with Just-in-Sun.
Part of the Just-in-Sun complex.
The Just-in-Sun crypto industrial complex.
And in fact, what is most amusing here, and we've started to see this in a number of cases, once you find the interesting addresses, the address appears in some of the Tron API documentation. So it's not possible that's random. When you see some of these bots tweeting, mentioning large addresses, it's conceivable that they pulled a list of highest holders of some token. That's probably not what happened, but that's conceivable. Here it's not that, right? It's in the API documentation that was written by a person. So It's just the example code they had on their system. So this is another piece of the ecosystem we now know is the same group.
So we've seen that as well when they automatically gave out airdrops. They also gave it out to themselves.
Yeah, so this is something I'd like to find a way to study. Maybe we'll look at this in the relatively near future. If you can find situations where the airdrop was in fact all to the project itself, or primarily just as a way of generating noise or promotion, whatever. I don't think anyone would be astonished to find out that the team indirectly, surreptitiously collected 10%, 20% of an airdrop. I'm not even speaking at a particular project. I just mean in general. It would be funny if there were examples where that rate was much, much higher. I mean, that's conjecture about future, whatever, use of the system to investigate stuff. But that's almost certainly true. Here we have a situation where you can now tell there's another part to this conglomerate. To that point, I guess I would make clear when people say, or when we say Just-in-Sun, we don't mean that person specifically. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and it's clear that there's a team, and there's some people, and there's developers, and there's stuff going on. It does look like
the same way Ronald McDonald doesn't run all the McDonald's.
Ronald McDonald is the mascot. I don't think this person's a mascot or whatever. we've also found a fair number of situations where you can tell deployer addresses are shared across projects and whatnot. So it is clearly one dev team or one conglomerate of dev teams doing the stuff. He's a front man, business development man, hype man, whatever.
It could be and this would really tickle me if it was the case, but it could be that everybody just outsources to that one outfit in Pune.
It had not occurred to me till you say that, but of course it's possible that some of these issues are outsourced developers doing stuff wrong. I don't know how we would investigate that.
I mean, okay.
That is worth stating more explicitly. So it is possible, that two projects that have nothing to do with each other use the same outsourced developers, and those developers aren't very careful and are deploying from the same wallets. That is not impossible. It doesn't seem that likely, but okay.
No, so why it could be possible, and likeliness, I think I won't speculate on that, but why it is possible is because even to this day, let's say now you wanted to start up a white label exchange. There are companies out there that do it for you, and then they share order books. I can name you the companies. ChainUp is one of them, and ChainUp was, I think, quite until I don't know what the situation is right now, but
this isn't tinfoil hat stuff. These are
this is actually
marketed as a service.
And I think ChainUp was until fairly recently very closely associated with Hobby. I don't know whether Justin Sun's acquisition, not acquisition. We don't know if he involvement with the exchange changed that relationship. But I know for a fact that and this was quite common in especially in 2018 where you had whatever front end you wanted, but the exchange engine, everything else was all common. And the order books were all shared across all of these exchanges, and this was very, very prevalent in the sort of like tier 2, tier 3 exchanges, which generally people, especially in North America and Europe, don't hear about. Mainly like this whole Chinese industrial crypto complex that serves offshore degen gamblers, whatever. I mean, we're not here to judge. We're just here to run through the data.
I think calling them degenerate gamblers is slightly judgmental. Just for the record.
Recreational gamblers.
You do you.
Yeah. All right. So. But I mean, they like being called degens. But anyway, okay. So so I actually think that there is some. I think that there is some merit to the fact that it could be, and this is an interesting point, and I assure you that we're going to be looking a little bit more closely into this, because it is possible that thinking that these entities, organizations, what have you, actually are the same people, whereas it could be that the developers are a bit sloppy because they've been doing it for so many times. It's just easy to sort of like copy and paste. As a result, some of these example addresses just keep getting used over and over again. Does that necessarily mean that they're all part of the same organization? We don't know.
It would tell you none of these organizations have their own developers, which is a separate conversation.
But again, would not necessarily surprise me, because it's not. It's not that fundamental to the
deploying a Uniswap fork is not challenging. So you pay some whatever consultant to go do that. It's 2 days work and you're done. Oh, okay. I'm open to that. Not a single person has raised this as a defense to the accusation that two projects were in fact the same. But
Well, and it is possible that they don't raise that as a so-called defense, so to speak, because they don't necessarily want to make it public. You know what I mean? You don't want to, if you knew that, like, Arby's was actually a Taco Bell at the back, you wouldn't want to advertise that.
I wouldn't go to either of those things. But, okay, fair enough. To some extent, certainly if you look at how the machinery works, a lot of this stuff is not complicated at all.
Correct.
And there's an awful lot of veneer of complexity. Okay.
So the idea that this would all be outsourced to a place like India, Vietnam, China, whatever the case may be, it's not unthinkable. Yeah. So I think, and rest assured, we'll go all Scooby-Doo on this, so we'll have a look. We don't know, and that's speculation. So, but to kind of wrap up that tweet that we spoke about, again, all the different metrics that we saw suggest that FarFuture is possibly likely to be the case, a market maker that links up these Justin Sun affiliated entities, and it all links back to the T Euro, the stuff which we covered not so long ago. The True Euro, and this one really tickles me, the True Chinese Yuan.
Well, it seems like many people have asserted for a long time that the number of different groups involved, the number of people is really quite small. but it's not one group. No one thinks there's only really one group. So it is interesting to watch the contours of these sort of conglomerates really come clearly into view as things. Well, I guess there's been consolidation following the collapses, and then you find out these are the same, and then you discover that they were always the same, right? Similarly, with the number of stablecoin providers dropping and people buying stuff, you start to see connections that were maybe not so obvious before. So wallets that interacted 3 years ago and then interact again in ways that suggest they've always been the same people.
Yeah. I mean, it says under new management, but it's the same old employees at the back. So shifting gears a little bit, we'll talk a bit about the opposition to defendants' motion to dismiss, basically the SEC's objection to Binance's motion to dismiss the lawsuit. Now,
can you explain motion to dismiss casually for people, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So TLDR, Binance is saying that they have no case to answer, basically. So they're asking the court to dismiss the entire lawsuit. SEC is saying nuh-uh. Binance is saying nuh-uh. And so this is the SEC's way of saying nuh-uh. And
by nuh-uh, there are
things to
questions here that merit a trial, a hearing, or whatever.
Basically, this is the SEC saying we need to go to the mattresses. Yeah. So, what surprised me reading these 88 pages is that they went into substantive arguments, which I found peculiar, because if I were an SEC lawyer, I don't see a need to do so, simply because all you need to do is show sufficient grounds for which this thing should go to trial. I really like this, one of the first few lines in the entire objection, and I mean, to me, this could have been submitted in one page, but basically, to wit, where they say, Binance's chief compliance officer crudely but succinctly summed up this case when he admitted that Binance was, quote, operating as a F-King, unlicensed securities exchange in the USA, bro, end of quote. That to me, that's yep, you know.
It suggests there may be something to merit the trial. It doesn't mean that they're right or wrong. The question is whether or not there's a real question, right?
If you had a question like that, any judge who's somewhat sentient would go to the mattresses with this. You know, what I mean, like
we go to the mat. You just mean they would say yes, it's worth having a trial.
It's worth having a trial. Right. There's something here. Yeah. So what puzzled me is that they decided to cover substantive arguments in this thing, going into relatively great detail with respect to the Howey test and getting kind of bogged down with the technicalities and stuff like that, which to me kind of it doesn't seem like the appropriate place and time to do this, because that's not what's being litigated right here. All we're trying to do here is just to show that there is something to be litigated, and you could really save this for the trial itself.
Sorry, but does Binance get a chance to reply to this?
Well, they technically, Binance filed a motion to dismiss. This is their opposition to the motion to dismiss. Then the judge decides, and once the judge decides, then it goes.
Oh, there's no more back and forth. Okay.
It either goes for or it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, there's, to me at least, no rational situation, like reason why it wouldn't go forward on the basis of the issues raised. And I mean, you have to bear in mind, right, that ultimately the judge is not going to decide on the merits at this stage. All the judge needs to decide is that there is something to be litigated, and it's very hard to see why there isn't something to be litigated. Whether or not these things are considered securities, all that, we can have a discussion about that.
The answer's not extremely obvious. There should be no hearing. Okay.
So it's interesting because some of the arguments that Binance raised is that, number one, you have no jurisdiction. These things are not securities, which is probably why they brought up some of those issues of securities. And this is something that may interest you. And I've highlighted this quote somewhere in the middle of the document. Is at page 29. And I'll read this. A crypto asset does nothing on its own. Smart contracts do things. It represents the value of something tracked on a ledger, distributed across a network of computers. Here, the crypto asset securities reflect the value their respective issuers and promoters give them by leading reasonable investors to expect profits based on the managerial and entrepreneurial efforts of the issuers and others.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, some of this connects. So that's the SEC making that.
That is the
argument,
SEC making that
thing
argument.
Is only got value because it relates to. I mean, this is a general issue I have with people on both sides of these things taking some
And
of the
might I
record
add, there are
keeping
very
too
fine people on both sides.
All right. Anyway, taking some of it a bit too literally. I mean, a database record doesn't do anything. A database record doesn't convey any legal rights.
No one doesn't.
You know, that's not how any email confirming you've booked a restaurant doesn't give you dinner, right? This is not how electronic record keeping works. Taking some of this stuff too literally, and I'm agreeing with, I think, the SEC's position here that records themselves don't ever do anything. They're just records.
Correct.
It's the structure around them that gives them meaning, and you have to discuss the structure around them. That doesn't mean that these are securities, but it means the argument, they're tracked on a computer, so they can't possibly be securities.
To understand
it's
this,
just crazy.
To understand this in a simple way, just because you have 2 sesame buns doesn't make it a hamburger. You have to put the meat inside.
Well, I'm not really sure that applies at all as an analogy here. But now the only thing that matters when you're talking about computer records is the stuff around the computer records and what ownership and meaning they reflect, because they never convey anything by themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, people might argue that having the private keys to a token lets you move the thing yourself, so that you don't rely on any external structure.
And so because
that doesn't attach to the real world.
Correct,
either.
and then but by extension that constitutes a right to move, but it has no until I guess. From one argument I could see being made is that it could be reasonably argued that having that capability makes you sort of like that becomes like a security right that crystallizes upon the exercise of that right.
Sorry, so I guess we can step back. This is a bifurcation that various regulators have started to make. If you have a token that doesn't have any direct connection to the real world at all, so the ability to transfer the records place, that is maybe not the same as you can do this to a token that is representing $1 or a share or voting rights or some other thing.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, all the equities that you own are just kept in database records, and it's only the structure around them that assigns you fractional ownership of the company that gives them any meaning in the first place.
Yeah.
So you could maybe talk about things that don't have any real-world connection, but as soon as you're talking about tokens with a real-world connection, all fiat redeemable stablecoins have a connection to the real world. That covers every exchange in the space. So, next. It does seem like there be an issue there, and the idea that, computers aren't, bound by laws because they're computers. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, that is on some level the argument that some of these people make.
I know. It's just funny to hear that being articulated.
I mean, the token itself isn't a security. Neither are the records stored in, Oracle, whatever, inside every bank in the world. But they still give you money when you put your card in the machine. So
ideally.
Yeah, well, or not, depending on. But yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so that's probably about all the time I want to spend on this. It's a relatively dry thing.
Oh, sorry. So, but do they achieve some delaying by submitting a longer filing? I mean, you could maybe argue they just want to push this out as far as possible. So these guys get trapped on something else. I don't know.
Oh yeah. To me, well, I mean that's Binance's role. Goal.
No. I mean, so if you're a securities regulator dealing with a contentious pushback situation, which everyone will agree the SEC is involved in some contentious pushback in a number of directions here. From their perspective, this is not a prediction, this is a description, right? From their perspective, the best thing that happens is all of the people that they're fighting with get picked up by some criminal department for some financing of some bad stuff, and then they go after them once they're already on trial or in prison or whatever it is. They love, the easiest position for a regulator is to prosecute the collapsed fraud. Again, I'm not saying consumer protection is achieved in this direction.
Oh, I think that
a lot,
I think that ship has already sailed.
No, but the company, if whatever exchange gets shut down for criminal money type stuff, then they come after them and say, well, yeah, your securities objections are kind of being ignored now, right? That's a classic, right? That's a classic. The fraud blows up, and then you know.
I would say yes, except that if that were the case, I don't fully understand this objection, because it seems
this doesn't successfully push it out further. I don't know.
It's overkill.
Okay.
Yeah, it's bringing a bazooka to a knife fight. You know what I mean? Like you don't really need to. Yeah, well, yeah, you will win, but it's excessive use of force. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you. It seems as if the SEC is pretty determined to push on this front. I think the recent conviction of SBF, although unrelated, and that's on criminal charges, makes it seem as if like there is at least from the prosecution standpoint, a little bit more pressure to go like, hey, they got their man, mission accomplished on the deck of the aircraft carrier stuff, and now it's time for the some of these other guys to step up to bat, and you want to swing and hit, and to show that you can hit. Otherwise, you lose a lot of that momentum, a lot of that limelight, and then you have to face re-election and stuff like that. It's a whole thing. So I can see why there might be a bit more momentum, a little bit more pressure to be more proactive on these fronts. You hit Binance possibly with the SEC hits a home run with Binance. That looks good for the prosecutors from the SEC side, and it gives everybody a sort of like a shot at the win, because when there's a major drug bust, everybody wants to get in on FBI, DEA, border protection. Everybody wants to be the guy who's taking a photo with all the drugs and the guns laid out on the mat, and stuff like that, with the hoods, and everybody wants to have that photo taken. So I think in the coming days and weeks at least, this is my speculation, is that you're going to see a lot more aggressive prosecutorial action. Because that's just how their brains work, and that's how they're designed, and they approach it from that perspective as well.
Actually, they can also still negotiate with SBF over sentencing recommendations, right?
Yes.
So they still have the ability to offer something in exchange for information, such as it is.
Correct. If there is the information,
yeah.
Which we've talked about this before, because if there was really information that was like genuinely substantive, he would have fallen off the balcony of the Albany by now.
Who knows? Dude seems so out of it. That testimony in his defense was so crazy that who knows what's really going on inside that guy's head.
We'll find out what the sentence is in March, right? Yeah. So it's still some
but
time.
That gives them months to negotiate over.
Yeah.
So the prosecutor will submit recommendations. There are guidelines, recommendations. The judge can do whatever
I think the fact that he claimed trial and testified and understand doesn't put him in good stead for a light sentence, if it comes to that.
You think? I mean, they could still cooperate now and get something better than. Anyway, that's a separate conversation.
Yeah. So finally, number go up. For those guys who've been looking to see crypto prices go up, this would have been a great week for you. It went beyond 35, and then when it hit 36 something, and as we're filming this right now, it's up like 36 and a bit for Bitcoin. So now, okay. Put aside all the speculation about ETFs and stuff like that, because that's just noise. It's like the talking heads on CNBC and stuff like that. They come out and they'll give you one of 1,000 reasons as to why prices go up, but that's not what we care about. What we care about, I think, is what is the stablecoin activity, because typically, and at least empirically and historically, let's just look at the data. When stablecoin flows generally, and I think this can be accepted, is that stablecoin flows generally are like a proxy to money flowing in or out of the ecosystem. So TLDR, rough and dirty, if you see more stablecoins being minted, i.e. more money is coming in, and the prices go up, maybe people are using that monies, convert to stablecoins to buy Bitcoin, Ether, or whatever. Now, at least from what we've seen, there hasn't been any meaningful increase in stablecoin, in terms of net stablecoins.
There's rotation among things, but there's not.
It's not a meaningful increase, and if nothing else, we've seen the pace of USDC, which is Circle's product, the pace of the market cap sliding to zero, increase.
Yeah. So the amounts of dollars coming out have broadly been dropping as it's fallen more than 50% in total market cap, but the rate at which money's coming out, the fraction that comes out each week, is actually increased marginally, not dramatically, but increased. It's increasing, not decreasing, as this thing approaches whatever its terminal minimal amount is, because it doesn't seem like it's going to reverse. Yeah, and then you see minting of primarily Tether, but also some FDUSD, whatever, and whatever's happening with the true dollar. Net numbers not going up or down, and yet we've seen a prolonged increase in prices without money coming in, which suggests people are buying without wanting to hold stablecoins, perhaps. I mean, and it's interesting to note that now that we're seeing a lot more parts of the ecosystem, the awareness that these things are used for stuff that's going to eventually get frozen, right? So I think there's more concern about how freezable things are. I mean, Tether is a real it has always been something of a central choke point for the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
But that's increased dramatically.
Yeah.
And as there's more and more clear evidence that it's being used, this is not to say that Tether people are part of this, whatever, conspiracy or action or use, but the product is being used by folks that many governments are not really very happy about. That risk may be coming closer to getting realized. Certainly USDC has always been assumed pretty close to law enforcement and freezing stuff. But Tether's been freezing stuff.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Tether blacklists wallets all the time.
Yeah. And you can imagine how if you're someone that is concerned, and if this is your only way to access dollars, right, you may at some point decide, well, I'm going to decrease the allocation to these dollar things and just try to use Bitcoin, just try to use Ether or whatever. So I can certainly see there being some rotation out of freezable assets in general and into unfreezable assets.
So a couple of years back, this was actually something that I said. I might have written about it. I don't recall, but essentially one of the things was that if Tether was ultimately determined to have some issues or something like that, I actually thought that that's what you would see. You would see the price of Bitcoin and Ether go up. Simply because that would be sort of like a safer thing to hold, because you can still swap that out for another stable coin.
The price in Tether would definitely go up. It's the Tether price.
But right now,
whether it would go up in dollars, correct. I don't know.
So the weird thing we're seeing now, right, is that the price number go up for everything. Yeah, and what we have seen is that the USDC market cap is falling precipitously, whereas there are some sort of like parallel back-to-back type minting activities in Tether. So it could be that, people who think, okay, you know what, I probably shouldn't hold on to this particular stable coin, buy a bunch of Bitcoin, price go up, whatever, sell, and then hold on to maybe, I don't know.
Okay, so I guess consider the flow. So you're a guy that doesn't have access to normal whatever banking.
Yeah.
So you're currently holding some amount of Bitcoin and some amount of Tether or USDC, whatever it is. If you decided you wanted to rotate your holdings into less seizable stuff, right, you would go to an exchange, market maker, whatever, and you would sell some stable coins, pick up some Bitcoin, Ether, whatever it is. The market makers ultimately that end up as the recipients of those stable coins, they will have some amount of liquidity they keep on chain. But because now there's a 500 basis point cost to keeping your money in stable coins as opposed to just in dollars, as soon as their balance hits whatever above the limit for liquidity they need to maintain, they'll be redeeming stuff, right? Keeping that off chain. So effectively, a bunch of people deciding to rotate from one into the other will withdraw dollars from the ecosystem and push up prices for purchasing the other coins. That is a plausible explanation for what's happening. It would explain why it looks like money is coming out. If somebody goes in, wishes to sell for dollars, those things will get reminted as stablecoins. Right?
Yeah.
It's just a question of when that happens. If somebody was able to produce, say, I mean, this is not a product that can exist, but if somebody could produce a credible, unseizable, properly dollar-backed, whatever, token, then you could imagine that sentiment reversing and people shifting back more into that. You're not going to be able to set such a thing up if you have to hold dollars in a bank account anyway, so
correct.
It's just a stylistic description. But people might decide to rotate in one direction or another. If for some reason it was decided that Bitcoin was a bad idea because you had difficulty selling, you could imagine, for example, the prices of things like Zcash and Monero moving dramatically if either action started to be taken against Ether or against people who were using Zcash or Monero. One of those would move the price up, one of those would move the price down. That stuff's probably coming as we start to see the battle lines be drawn and more stuff get blacklisted, frozen, cut off. There was a dramatic change in the way people approached stablecoin and just on-chain liquidity management when the U.S. banks blew up in March.
Yeah.
If you have a round of crypto stuff frozen, seized, arrested, whatever type more blacklisting going on, you'd expect to see something like that happening in that space instead. We will find out.
We'll find out. But TLDR, I mean, I want to make it clear that there's no indication at all that more money is entering the system. So there's no evidence of that.
Yeah, it looks more like a rotation from one place to another, frankly.
That how sustainable that is, I don't know, but I can tell you that we don't see, at least from our perspective, well, I mean, from the data, from the chain data, there just doesn't seem to be any evidence that extra money is coming in. In fact, analysis based on retail appetite for this stuff, there's no indication that there's any increase in retail appetite. I think there was some increase in numbers, but not meaningful. Very, very tiny increases in numbers, a couple of percentage points, in terms of like the balance between retail and so-called institutional traders in the space. But again, we're not seeing meaningful inflows of, I don't know, real dollars, if you want to use that term, into the digital assets at this point in time. So remains to be seen. We'll see. So anyway, on that note, we had a bit of a longer episode. We're back from Hong Kong, obviously. Thank you for guys who saw us at the Hong Kong FinTech Week. Thank you for stopping by the booth. And that's all we have for you this week. As usual, if you've got any comments, any questions, anything you'd like us to cover, hit us up in the comment section below. Thank you for all the feedback for the podcast. We're working on a pure audio one. It's still a long work in progress. It's a lot of backlog of work that we've got to do in other areas. So bear with us as we get to that. Thank you for tuning in. Smash that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it when you do that. Comment, because it helps us out with the algorithm. Otherwise, we'll see you again next Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.